in the shadowed ruins of an ancient kingdom, where time has worn the stones smooth and silence hangs heavy in the air, a young thief named Kael moves with practiced ease. His fingers brush against the cold, damp walls of a hidden chamber, a place forgotten by history and untouched by light for centuries. Among the dust and decay, something glimmers faintly, drawing him closer. It's a crown, but not just any crown. This is the crown of shadows, an artifact whispered about in legends, said to hold the power of kings long lost to memory. As Kael reaches out, his hand trembling, the air around him seems to shift. The moment his fingers make contact, the world dissolves into chaos. Visions crash over him like a tidal wave. A land torn apart by war, a throne drenched in blood, and a darkness so vast it threatens to swallow everything. Kael stumbles back, his breath ragged, his mind reeling. He realizes this isn't just a relic of the past. It's a key to a destiny he never asked for. The weight of its power presses down on him, forcing a choice. Leave the crown buried and walk away, or take it and risk unleashing a darkness that could destroy the world. His decision will set the course of a story filled with danger, betrayal, and the echoes of forgotten kings. What will he choose, and what will the crown demand in return? The moment Kael's fingers close around the crown of shadows, the chamber erupts into chaos. The air grows thick, almost suffocating, as shadowy figures materialize from the darkness itself, their forms shifting, their eyes gleaming with an otherworldly hunger. Without hesitation, Kael bolts, the crown clutched tightly against his chest as he sprints through the crumbling ruins. The sound of his pounding heart drowns out the whispers of the shadows, but he can feel them closing in, their presence like a cold breath on the back of his neck. He plunges into the dense forest, the twisted branches clawing at him as if the very world seeks to slow him down. It's here, in the heart of the wilderness, that he stumbles upon Lyra. She's no ordinary traveler. Her sharp eyes and the weight of knowledge in her stance mark her as something more. A rogue scholar, she's been tracking the crown for years, driven by a singular purpose: to prevent its power from falling into the wrong hands. When she sees it in Kael's grasp, her expression flickers between relief and alarm. "You don't understand what you've taken," she says, her voice low and urgent. That crown isn't just a relic, it's a harbinger. An ancient prophecy speaks of ruin and rebirth tied to its power. If it awakens fully, it won't just destroy you, it could unravel the world. Kael, still reeling from the visions and the relentless pursuit of the shadows, is torn. He doesn't trust her. Why would he? But the weight of the crown's power and the growing darkness leave him with little choice. Reluctantly, he agrees to travel with her to Eldarion, a city steeped in secrets and ancient knowledge. Perhaps there, they can uncover the truth about the crown and how to stop the forces it seems to summon. Their journey is anything but smooth. The shadowy figures ambush them at every turn, their attacks growing bolder and more vicious. During one such assault, Kael is forced to tap into the crown's power for the first time. The surge of energy is overwhelming, a raw, untamed force that rips through him, scattering their attackers like leaves in a storm, but the victory comes at a cost. Kael collapses, his body trembling as the crown's energy drains him, leaving him weaker than before. And as he lies there, Struggling to catch his breath, he notices something chilling. The shadows seem darker now, more solid, as if his use of the crown has only made them stronger. Lyra watches him with a mixture of concern and suspicion. Every time you use it, she warns, you feed the very thing you're trying to escape. The crown doesn't just hold power, it consumes it. And it will consume you too, if you're not careful. The uneasy alliance between thief and scholar grows tenser with each passing moment. Kael's instincts scream at him to run, to leave the crown and its cursed power behind. But something deeper, a flicker of curiosity, or perhaps destiny, keeps him moving forward. Together they press on toward Eldarion, the shadows at their heels and the weight of the crown pressing heavier with every step. The question lingers in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Can they outrun the darkness, or are they already too late? The streets of Eldarion are a labyrinth of ancient stone and whispered secrets, a city where every corner seems to hold a fragment of forgotten history. Kael and Lyra move through the bustling marketplace, the crown hidden beneath a worn cloak, its weight a constant reminder of the danger they carry. Their destination is a secluded tower at the city's edge, home to an old sage named Thaler. Known for his vast knowledge of the arcane, Thaler is rumored to have studied the Crown of Shadows in his youth. As they approach the tower, the air grows heavy, and the faint hum of magic prickles at Kael's skin. Thaler greets them with a gaze that seems to pierce through their very souls. His voice, weathered by time, carries the weight of centuries as he speaks. The Crown of Shadows, he begins, his tone grave, is no mere relic. It is a vessel bound to the bloodline of the forgotten kings, those who once ruled this land in an age lost to memory. His eyes lock onto Kael, and for the first time, Kael feels the full weight of the sage's scrutiny. The fact that you can wield its power, Thaler continues, suggests you are of their lineage. A descendant of kings, though you may not know it. Kael's stomach twists. An orphan his entire life, he's never known where he came from, let alone imagined a connection to royalty. The revelation feels like a punch to the chest, leaving him breathless and uncertain. That's impossible, he mutters, though the crown's pull on him feels all too real. Thaler's voice cuts through his disbelief. The crown's power is both a gift and a curse. It was forged in an age of strife, meant to protect the realm, but its magic is unstable, corrupted by the darkness it was meant to contain. If it falls into the wrong hands, the consequences will be catastrophic. The sage's tone grows urgent. You must destroy it, shatter the crown, and scatter its pieces, or risk unleashing the very evil it was created to suppress. But Lyra steps forward, her voice firm. Destroying it might not be the only answer, she argues. The crown holds immense power that could be used to heal the fractured kingdoms, to restore what was lost. If we can learn to control it, to wield it wisely, it could be the key to ending the chaos that plagues this land. Her words carry a conviction that makes Kael pause, though he can't shake the unease gnawing at him. The debate between Thaler and Lyra grows heated, their voices rising as they clash over the crown's fate. Kael stands caught between them, torn by the weight of his newfound identity and the gravity of the choice before him. Trust Lyra's vision of restoration, or heed Thaler's warnings of destruction. The decision feels impossible, and the crown's presence, seems to grow heavier with every passing moment. Before the argument can reach its conclusion, the city erupts into chaos. The shadowy figures that have pursued Kael and Lyra since the ruins descend upon Eldarion, their forms now more solid, more menacing than ever. They move with a singular purpose, cutting through the city's defenses as if they were nothing. At their head stands a figure cloaked in darkness, a sorcerer whose very presence seems to drain the light from the air. His eyes, cold and calculating, lock onto Kael, and a cruel smile twists his lips. The crown, he calls, his voice echoing with unnatural power, belongs to me. The attack leaves no time for hesitation. Kael, Lyra, and Thaler are forced to flee, the crown's fate still unresolved as the city burns around them. The choices ahead are fraught with peril, and the line between ally and enemy grows ever more blurred. As the shadows close in, Kael realizes one thing with chilling clarity. The crown's power is not just a burden, it's a beacon. And now, the darkness knows exactly where to find him. The chaos of Eldarion fades into the distance as Kael and Lyra flee, their breaths ragged and their hearts pounding. The city's once proud spires are now silhouetted against a sky choked with smoke, a grim reminder of the destruction they've left behind. Thaler, gravely wounded, leans heavily on Kael as they stumble through the forest. His strength is fading fast, but his grip on Kael's arm is firm, his eyes burning with urgency. Listen carefully, he rasps, his voice barely above a whisper. The crown of shadows cannot be destroyed by mortal hands, but there is a way to counter its power, the shard of light. It lies hidden in the whispering marshes, guarded by trials no ordinary soul could endure. Find it, or all is lost. With those final words, Thaler's hand falls limp, his body slumping against Kael. The weight of his death settles heavily on Kael's shoulders, a mix of grief and guilt churning within him. He looks to Lyra, searching for answers, but her expression is unreadable, a storm of emotions flickering behind her eyes. "We don't have time for this," she says sharply, her voice cutting through the silence. "If the Sorcerer's forces are tracking the crown, we need to move, now." Kael hesitates, torn between the weight of Thaler's last words and the urgency of their escape. The crown pulses faintly in his hands, its power a constant, unsettling presence. He can feel it whispering to him, tugging at the edges of his mind, but he pushes the sensation aside. For now, there's no choice but to press forward. Their path leads them to the whispering marshes, a sprawling expanse of mist-shrouded wetlands that seem to breathe with a life of their own. The air is thick with the scent of decay, and the ground squelches beneath their feet with every step. Strange sounds echo through the fog, whispers that seem to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. It's a place where reality bends, where illusions blur the line between truth and deception. As they venture deeper, Kael begins to notice something strange. The crown's influence is growing stronger, manifesting in ways he can't fully understand. Visions flash before his eyes, glimpses of a past he doesn't recognize. He sees a king, cloaked in shadow, wielding the crown with both awe and terror. He feels the weight of 1,000 decisions, the burden of power, and the cost of wielding it. The visions are vivid, almost overwhelming, leaving him disoriented and unsure of what's real. Lyra notices his unease and slows her pace, her sharp eyes studying him. "The crown's power is changing you," she says, her tone cautious. "It's not just a tool, Kael. It's a part of you now, and if you're not careful, it will consume you." Her warning hangs in the air, heavy with unspoken implications, but there's no time to dwell on it. The marshes are alive with ancient traps, hidden beneath the murky water, illusions designed to lead them astray, and creatures that move like shadows through the mist. Each step feels like a gamble, each decision a potential misstep. Yet, despite the peril, Kael can't shake the feeling that they're being watched. The dark sorcerer's forces are closing in, their presence a constant threat that looms just beyond the edge of their awareness. The journey through the marshes is a test of endurance and resolve, pushing Kael and Lyra to their limits. The closer they get to the shard of light, the more Kael feels the crown's pull, a duality of power and peril that leaves him questioning his own strength. Can he resist its influence long enough to find the shard, or will the darkness within the crown claim him before they ever reach their goal? As the fog thickens and the whispers grow louder, one thing becomes clear. The path ahead is fraught with danger, and every choice they make could tip the balance between salvation and ruin. The crown's power is a double-edged sword, and Kael is beginning to realize just how deep its blade can cut. The mist of the whispering marshes coils around Kael and Lyra like a living thing, its damp tendrils clinging to their skin as they press forward. The air is thick with the scent of decay, and the faint whispers that echo through the fog seem to grow louder with every step. Suddenly, the ground gives way beneath them, splitting their path with a surge of murky water. Before they can react, shadowy figures emerge from the mist, their forms shifting and indistinct, yet their intent clear separation. Kael shouts for Lyra, but the fog swallows his voice. She's gone, vanished into the haze, leaving him alone with the marsh's illusions. The whispers grow sharper, more personal, twisting into voices that sound eerily like his own. They taunt him, dredging up doubts he's tried to bury. "You're no king," one voice hisses. "A thief, an orphan, a fool who stumbled into a destiny too great for his worth." The words cut deep, echoing the insecurities he's carried since Thaler revealed his lineage. The marsh feeds on his fear, conjuring visions of the crown's power, spiraling out of control. A world consumed by shadows, a throne drenched in blood, and a king who is nothing more than a puppet to the darkness. Kael stumbles through the illusions, his breath ragged, his mind teetering on the edge of despair. But then, something shifts. The whispers falter, and for the first time, Kael sees through the lies. He's not just a thief or an orphan. He's the one who chose to carry the crown, to face its burden, and that choice alone makes him stronger than the shadows. With newfound resolve, he pushes through the illusions, the marsh's grip loosening as he emerges on the other side. But his relief is short-lived. The sound of distant voices, cold, calculating, reaches his ears. Lyra's voice cuts through the mist, sharp and defiant, but it's quickly silenced. Kael's heart pounds as he realizes the truth. The sorcerer's forces have taken her. The choice before him is agonizing. The shard of light is within reach, the key to countering the crown's power and fulfilling Thaler's dying wish. But Lyra, the scholar who stood by his side despite the danger, is now in the hands of the enemy. The weight of the crown presses on him, its whispers urging him to abandon her, to focus on the greater good. But Kael knows he can't. He won't. Turning away from the path to the shard, he follows the trail of the sorcerer's minions, his steps quick and purposeful. The enemy's stronghold looms ahead, a fortress of jagged stone and twisted magic. Kael knows he can't face it alone, not without tapping into the crown's power. Reluctantly, he reaches for it, feeling the surge of energy flood his veins. The shadows part before him, revealing hidden passages and weak points in the fortress's defenses. He moves like a ghost, slipping past guards and traps, with an ease that feels almost unnatural. When he finds Lyra, she's bound and bruised but unbroken. Her eyes widen in surprise as Kael frees her, but there's no time for words. The fortress begins to collapse around them, the crown's power destabilizing the sorcerer's magic. They escape just as the stronghold crumbles into the marsh, the echoes of its fall swallowed by the fog, but the victory comes at a cost. Kael feels it as soon as they're safe. The crown's power lingers in him, its whispers louder now, more insistent. His hands tremble, his vision blurs, and for a moment, he's not sure where the crown ends and he begins. Lyra notices, her sharp eyes narrowing with concern. "You're pushing yourself too hard," she says, her voice softer than usual. "The crown's power isn't infinite, Kael. Every time you use it, it takes a piece of you." Her words hang in the air, a warning neither of them can ignore. The shard is still out there, the sorcerer's forces are regrouping, and the crown's influence grows stronger with every passing moment. Kael knows the path ahead is fraught with danger, but one thing is clear. The choices he makes now will shape not just his fate, but the fate of the world. And the darkness within the crown is waiting, ready to claim him if he falters. The forbidden peaks rise before them, jagged and unyielding, their snow-capped summits piercing the sky like the teeth of some ancient beast. The air grows thin as Kael and Lyra begin their ascent, each step a battle against the biting cold and the treacherous terrain. The crown, now a constant weight at Kael's side, seems to hum faintly, its energy pulsing in time with his heartbeat. Lyra watches him closely, her sharp eyes catching every flicker of unease that crosses his face. She doesn't need to say it. Her silence speaks volumes. She's worried, not just about the journey or the dangers ahead, but about him, about the way his hand lingers on the crown, the way his gaze sometimes drifts, as if he's listening to something only he can hear. As they climb, the tension between them grows sharper. Kael's reliance on the crown becomes harder to ignore. When a rock slide threatens to bury them, it's the crown's power that parts the debris, saving their lives. But the effort leaves him drained, his hands trembling as he leans against a boulder for support. Lyra steps forward, her voice steady but laced with concern. "You can't keep doing this," she says. "Every time you use it, it takes more from you. There has to be another way." Kael looks up, his eyes shadowed but determined. "And if there isn't," he counters, "what's the alternative? Let the sorcerer win. Let the world burn. I don't have a choice, Lyra." The peaks grow steeper, the air colder, until at last they reach the summit. There, bathed in an otherworldly glow, lies the shard of light. It's smaller than Kael expected, no larger than a dagger, but its brilliance is staggering. a beacon of purity in a world shrouded in shadow. Before they can approach, a figure materializes from the light itself. The guardian spirit is ethereal, its form shifting like flame, and its voice resonates with a power that reverberates through the very mountain. To claim the shard, it intones, "You must prove your worth. Only those who understand the balance of light and shadow may pass." The trial is unlike anything they've faced before. The spirit conjures visions, forcing them to confront their deepest fears and doubts. Kael sees himself consumed by the crown's power, a king of darkness ruling over a broken world. Lyra sees her hopes of restoring the kingdom crumbling to ash, but it's Kael's connection to the crown that allows them to pass. He uses its power to shatter the illusions, to prove that he can wield both light and shadow. The spirit's gaze lingers on him as it steps aside, its voice low and solemn. "You have passed the trial," it says, "but know this, the shard's light may counter the crown's darkness, but it cannot cure what lies within you." The true battle is not against the shadows around you, but the ones within. Kael takes the shard, its light searing against his palm. The moment it touches the crown, a surge of energy ripples through him, a clash of forces so intense it nearly knocks him to his knees. The shard's light amplifies the crown's power, creating an unstable balance that feels as though it could unravel at any moment. Kael's breath comes in short gasps, his vision swimming as the two forces war within him. Lyra steps closer, her voice urgent. "Kael, we need to go, now." But he doesn't move, his gaze fixed on the shard. For the first time, he feels the full weight of what lies ahead. The shard is not a solution, it's a catalyst. And the deeper he goes, the more he realizes that the greatest threat may not be the sorcerer or the darkness, but the choices he's yet to make. The descent from the peaks is a blur, the shard's light casting long, flickering shadows that seem to twist and move on their own. Kael feels the crown's whispers growing louder, more insistent, as if the shard's presence has awakened something dormant within it. Lyra keeps pace beside him, her silence heavy with unspoken questions. The path ahead is uncertain, the balance between light and shadow more fragile than ever. And as the wind howls through the peaks, carrying with it the echoes of the Guardian's warning, one truth becomes painfully clear. The shard may be their only hope, but it could also be their undoing. The journey back to Eldarion is a blur of exhaustion and tension. The shard's light pulses faintly in Kael's grip, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold weight of the crown at his side. Lyra moves ahead, her steps steady but her silence heavy with unspoken thoughts. She doesn't look back, and Kael can't decide if it's because she's focused on the path ahead or because she's avoiding him. The closer they get to the city, the more the air seems to hum with an uneasy energy, as if the land itself is bracing for what's to come. When they crest the final hill, the sight that greets them is nothing short of devastation. Eldarion, once a beacon of knowledge and strength, is now a battlefield. The dark sorcerer's forces swarm the city like a plague, their shadowy forms cutting through the defenders with terrifying efficiency. Flames rise from the rooftops, and the air is thick with the sounds of screams and clashing steel. Kael's heart pounds as he takes it all in, the weight of the crown and shard pressing against him like a living thing. Lyra turns to him, her eyes sharp with urgency. "This is it. she says, her voice cutting through the chaos. The shard and the crown, they are the only way to stop this. But Kael, you have to be careful. The balance between them is fragile. If you lose control, she doesn't finish the sentence, but she doesn't need to. The warning is clear. Kael nods, though his hands tremble as he grips the relics. The moment he steps into the fray, the world seems to slow. The crown's power surges through him, a torrent of darkness that threatens to sweep him away, but the shard's light acts as a tether, anchoring him. Together, they amplify his strength, turning him into a force unlike anything the battlefield has ever seen. His movements are swift and precise, his strikes cutting through the enemy with a power that feels almost unnatural. The shadows recoil from him, the sorcerer's minions faltering as his presence becomes a beacon of resistance, but the power comes at a cost. Every use of the relics takes a toll, draining him physically and mentally. The crown whispers to him, its voice growing louder, more insistent, as the shard's light fights to keep it in check. The battle rages on, and Kael pushes himself harder, faster, until his vision blurs and his body screams for rest. Still, he doesn't stop. He can't. Not while the city burns. Not while the people he's come to care for are in danger. When the last of the enemy forces retreat, Kael collapses, the shard slipping from his hand as darkness claims him. He doesn't hear the cheers of the defenders or feel the hands that lift him from the ground. He's only vaguely aware of the voices around him, murmuring words like hero and savior. When he finally awakens, it's to the sight of a city rebuilding itself, its people looking to him with hope and gratitude. But Lyra's face tells a different story. She sits by his bedside, her expression unreadable. When she speaks, her voice is quiet but firm. "You scared me," she admits, her gaze fixed on the crown resting on a nearby table. "What you did out there, it was incredible, but it was reckless. You're playing with forces you don't fully understand, Kael, and every time you use them, you're risking more than just your life." Kael looks at her, the weight of her words settling heavily on his chest. He wants to argue, to tell her he had no choice, but the truth is, he's not sure. The line between controlling the crown and being controlled by it feels thinner than ever. The shard's light may have given him a way to fight back, but it hasn't silenced the whispers in his mind. If anything, they've grown louder, more persuasive, and as he sits there, surrounded by the adoration of a city he saved, he can't shake the feeling that he's teetering on the edge of something far greater and far more dangerous than he ever imagined. The battle may be over, but the war within him is just beginning. The quiet of Eldarion's rebuilt streets is shattered when a figure cloaked in shadow steps into the light. The emissary moves with an unsettling grace, his presence commanding the attention of everyone around him. Kael and Lyra stand ready, their hands hovering over their weapons, but the emissary raises his hands in a gesture of peace. "I come not as an enemy," he says, his voice smooth and measured, "but as a messenger. My master offers you a choice, Kael, a chance to claim the legacy that was stolen from you." Kael's breath catches. The emissary speaks of the dark sorcerer, revealing a truth that sends a chill through the air. The sorcerer is no mere warlock. He is the last king of a fallen dynasty, a ruler who once wielded the crown of shadows and sought to use its power to save his kingdom. But the crown's darkness consumed him. twisting his noble intentions into something monstrous. Now, he sees Kael as a kindred spirit, a descendant of the same bloodline, and offers him a place at his side. Together, the emissary says, his words dripping with allure, "You could restore what was lost. The crown's power could be yours to command, your bloodline's glory reborn. You were never meant to walk in the shadows, Kael. You were born to rule." The offer hangs in the air, heavy with temptation. Kael feels the weight of it pressing down on him, the crown's whispers growing louder, more insistent. The emissary's words strike a chord deep within him, awakening a yearning he's tried to ignore. He's spent his life as an outsider, a thief with no past and no future. The idea of reclaiming his heritage, of stepping into the role he was born for, is intoxicating. But beneath the allure lies a darker truth, the fear of becoming like the Sorcerer, a king consumed by the very power he seeks to wield. Lyra steps forward, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Don't listen to him," she says, her tone fierce. "This is a trap. The crown's power will destroy you, just like it destroyed him. You're better than this, Kael. You don't need to prove anything to anyone." Her words are meant to steady him, to remind him of the person he's fought to become. But Kael can't shake the doubt creeping into his mind. The crown's influence has been growing stronger, its whispers more persuasive with every passing day. How long can he resist its pull before it consumes him? The tension between Kael and Lyra reaches a breaking point. "You don't understand," he snaps, his voice rising with frustration. "You've never been nothing. You've never had to fight just to exist. This isn't just about power. It's about who I am, who I'm supposed to be." His words hang in the air, sharp and unyielding. Lyra's expression hardens, but there's a flicker of hurt in her eyes. She's always been his anchor, the one who kept him grounded when the crown's whispers grew too loud. But now, she can see the distance between them growing, the pull of the crown driving a wedge that neither of them knows how to bridge. Kael turns away, his steps quick and purposeful as he storms off into the night. The emissary's offer lingers in his mind, a siren's call he can't silence. Lyra watches him go, her heart heavy with a mix of anger and fear. She's always believed in him, trusted him to make the right choice. But now, for the first time, she wonders if the crown's hold on him is too strong, if he's already too far gone. As the moon casts its pale light over the city, Kael stands alone, the crown's whispers growing louder, more insistent. The choice before him is no longer just about power or legacy. It's about who he wants to be. Can he resist the allure of his bloodline's legacy? Or will the crown's darkness claim him, just as it claimed the Sorcerer? The answer lies in the shadows, waiting to be unveiled. Kael stands at the edge of the ancient ruins, his breath visible in the cold night air. The crumbling stones of his ancestors' kingdom rise before him, their jagged outlines cutting through the darkness like broken teeth. This place, once a beacon of unity and power, now lies in silent ruin, a testament to the crown's destructive legacy. The weight of the crown presses against him, its whispers growing louder as he steps forward, drawn by a force he can't fully explain. He knows he's walking into the heart of his past, but what he finds there will challenge everything he thinks he knows about himself and the burden he carries. The air inside the ruins is heavy with the scent of decay and the faint hum of forgotten magic. Kael moves cautiously, his footsteps echoing through the empty halls. The walls are covered in ancient carvings, images of kings and battles, of a time when the crown was a symbol of hope rather than ruin. As he delves deeper, the whispers of the crown grow more insistent, as if guiding him toward something or someone. Suddenly, the air shifts, and a figure materializes before him, its form shimmering with an ethereal light. It's the spirit of his forebear, the last king to wield the crown. His presence is commanding, his gaze piercing as he looks upon Kael with a mixture of pride and sorrow. "You've come far," the spirit says, his voice echoing with the weight of centuries. But the path ahead is fraught with choices that will define not just your fate, but the fate of this land. Kael's heart pounds as the spirit begins to unravel the truth. The crown was never meant to be a weapon or a tool of conquest. It was created to unite the fractured kingdoms, to bring peace through understanding and shared purpose. But its power proved too great, too seductive. Those who sought to wield it were consumed by its darkness, their noble intentions twisted into greed and destruction. The cycle must end, the spirit says, his tone grave. The crown's power is a curse, one that will continue to destroy until it is broken. The revelation hits Kael like a blow. To break the cycle, he must destroy both the crown and the shard, the very relics that have defined his journey. But there's a cost. Destroying them would erase his bloodline's legacy forever, severing his connection to the kings who came before him. The spirit's words hang in the air, heavy with finality. The choice is yours, Kael. Cling to the legacy of your ancestors, or sacrifice it to save the world from the darkness they unleashed. Kael's mind races, torn between the weight of his lineage and the responsibility he now bears. The crown's whispers grow louder, tempting him with visions of power and glory, of a world where he rules as the rightful heir to a forgotten throne. But beneath the allure lies the truth. The same power that could elevate him could also destroy him. He thinks of Lyra, of the people he's fought to protect, and the sacrifices already made. Can he walk away from the legacy he's only just discovered, or is he willing to risk everything to end the cycle of destruction? The ruins seem to close in around him, the weight of his ancestors' choices pressing down on his shoulders. The spirit watches in silence, his expression unreadable. Kael knows there's no easy answer, no path free of loss. But as he stands there, the crown's whispers fading into the background, he realizes one thing with absolute clarity. The true measure of his legacy isn't in the power he wields, but in the choices he makes. And those choices will determine whether the shadows of the past continue to haunt the future, or if they can finally be laid to rest. The ruins fall silent, the spirit's form dissolving into the air as Kael turns to leave. The weight of the crown feels heavier than ever, but there's a newfound resolve in his steps. The path ahead is uncertain, but one thing is clear: the time for hesitation is over. The fate of the world and his own soul hangs in the balance. Kael emerges from the ruins, the weight of his ancestors' legacy pressing heavily on his mind. The crown pulses faintly in his hands, its whispers now quieter, as if it knows the gravity of the choice he faces. He finds Lyra waiting at the edge of the forest, her sharp eyes scanning him for signs of what transpired within the ancient walls. Without a word, he steps forward, his voice steady but laced with resolve. "It's time to end this," he says. "The crown, the shard, they have to be destroyed. It's the only way to break the cycle." Lyra nods, her expression a mix of relief and apprehension. She knows the cost of this decision, but she also understands the necessity. Together, they set off. The relics wait, a constant reminder of the stakes, but the shadows have been watching. As they move through the dense forest, the air grows unnaturally still, the faint rustle of leaves, the only warning before the ambush. The dark sorcerer's forces descend upon them with a ferocity that leaves no room for hesitation. Kael and Lyra fight back, their movements swift and coordinated, but the enemy is relentless. In the chaos, a blade strikes the shard, its light flaring brilliantly before shattering into fragments. The explosion of energy sends Kael sprawling, his vision swimming as the battlefield spins around him. Regaining his footing, Kael sees Lyra fall, a deep wound staining her side. Panic surges through him as he rushes to her side, his hands trembling as he presses against the injury. The crown's power pulses faintly, its whispers growing louder, more urgent. Without thinking, he channels its energy, the dark magic flowing into Lyra to stabilize her. Her breathing steadies, but her eyes remain closed, her face pale. The realization hits him like a blow. The crown's power is the only thing keeping her alive. The battle rages on, but Kael's focus is fractured. Every use of the crown drains him, his body weakening as its darkness seeps deeper into his soul. The sorcerer's forces press harder, their attacks growing more vicious, and Kael knows they can't hold out much longer. With a surge of desperation, he unleashes the crown's full power, the shadows erupting around him like a storm. The enemy falters, their forms dissolving into the darkness, but the victory is hollow. Kael collapses beside Lyra, his strength all but spent. As they retreat into the safety of the forest, Kael's mind races. The shard is gone, its light extinguished, leaving only the crown's darkness to sustain Lyra. He can feel its pull growing stronger, its whispers more insistent, tempting him with promises of power and salvation. But he knows the cost. Every use of the crown brings him closer to the edge, to the point of no return. The choice before him is agonizing: continue his quest to destroy the crown and risk losing Lyra, or embrace its power to save her, knowing it could consume him completely. The forest is silent, the weight of his decision pressing down on him like a physical force. He looks at Lyra, her face peaceful in unconsciousness, and feels a surge of protectiveness. She's fought by his side, believed in him when no one else did. Can he really abandon her now, even if it means damning himself? The crown's whispers grow louder, a seductive melody that tugs at his resolve. But beneath the temptation lies a deeper truth. The darkness within the crown isn't just a threat to him. It's a threat to everything he's fought to protect. As the first light of dawn breaks through the trees, Kael sits in silence, the crown resting heavily in his hands. The path ahead is uncertain, the choice is fraught with peril. But one thing is clear: the time for hesitation is over. Whatever he decides, the consequences will ripple far beyond himself, shaping the fate of the world and the legacy he leaves behind. The forest is cloaked in an eerie stillness as Kael kneels beside Lyra, her breath shallow and her face pale. The shard's light is gone, shattered in the heat of battle. leaving only the crown's dark power as a lifeline. His hands tremble as he reaches for it, the weight of the decision pressing down on him like a mountain. But there's no time to hesitate. Lyra's life hangs in the balance, and the crown's whispers grow louder, more insistent, promising him the strength to save her. With a deep breath, he channels its energy, the shadows swirling around him as they flow into her wound. The effect is immediate. Her breathing steadies, her color returns, and the danger passes. But as the darkness recedes, Kael feels something shift within him. The crown's power lingers, a cold presence that settles deep in his chest, and he knows he's crossed a line. When Lyra awakens, her eyes flutter open to find Kael standing over her, his expression unreadable. There's something different about him. His eyes, once bright with determination, now gleam with a faint shadow. His demeanor is colder, more distant, as if a part of him has been sealed away. She reaches for his hand, her voice soft but urgent. "Kael, what did you do?" He doesn't meet her gaze, his tone flat as he replies, "What I had, too. You were dying." Lyra's heart sinks as she realizes the truth. "You used the crown again," she says, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and frustration. "Kael, you can't keep doing this. Every time you use it, it changes you. Don't you see? You're losing yourself to it." Her words are sharp, cutting through the tension like a blade. She's seen the toll the crown has taken on him, the way its darkness has seeped into his soul, and she knows it's only a matter of time before it consumes him completely. But Kael shakes his head, his jaw tightening. "What choice do I have, Lyra? The Sorcerer's forces are stronger than ever. The shard is gone. This is the only way to stop him. To protect you, to protect everyone." His voice is steady, but there's an edge to it, a hardness that wasn't there before. The crown's whispers echo in his mind, urging him to embrace its power, to see himself not as a thief or a wanderer, but as a king. The idea takes root, growing stronger with each passing moment, and Kael feels the weight of it pressing down on him. Lyra watches him, her heart aching as she sees the distance growing between them. She's always been his anchor, the one who kept him grounded when the crown's whispers grew too loud. But now, she can feel him slipping away, pulled into the darkness by the very power he's trying to control. "There has to be another way," she pleads, her voice breaking. "We'll find it together. But Kael, if you keep using the crown, it won't just destroy you. It will destroy everything we've fought for." Her words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken fears, but Kael doesn't respond. His gaze is distant, his mind already turning to the battles ahead. The crown's whispers grow louder, filling his thoughts with visions of power and glory, of a kingdom restored and a legacy reclaimed. He knows Lyra is right, but the pull of the crown is too strong, its promises too seductive. The line between saving the world and ruling, it feels thinner than ever, and Kael isn't sure which side he's standing on. As they continue their journey, the tension between them grows sharper. Kael becomes more isolated, his focus narrowing to the crown and the power it offers. Lyra tries to reach him, her voice a constant reminder of the man he used to be, but her words seem to fall on deaf ears. The darkness within him grows, its influence spreading like a shadow over his soul. And all the while, the Sorcerer's forces grow stronger, their attacks more relentless, as if they sense the growing divide between Kael and the only person who could pull him back from the edge. The whispers of the crown grow louder, more insistent, urging Kael to embrace his destiny. You were born to rule, they say, their voices a chorus of temptation and truth. The throne is yours, the power is yours, all you have to do is take it. Kael listens, his resolve hardening with each word. The path ahead is clear, but the cost is steep. The man he once was is fading, replaced by something darker, colder, and more powerful. And as the shadows close in, Kael realizes that the greatest battle he faces isn't against the Sorcerer or his forces. It's against the darkness within himself. The forest stretches endlessly before them, its silence broken only by the faint rustle of leaves and the distant cries of unseen creatures. Kael walks ahead, his steps deliberate, his mind consumed by the crown's whispers. Lyra follows, her heart heavy with the knowledge that the man she once knew may already be lost. The journey is far from over, but one thing is certain. The choices Kael makes now will shape not just his fate, but the fate of the world, and the darkness within the crown is waiting, ready to claim him if he falters. The path to the Sorcerer's fortress winds through a desolate landscape, where the earth seems to bleed shadows and the air hums with an oppressive energy. Kael walks in silence, his gaze fixed on the horizon, where the dark spires of the fortress rise like jagged claws against the sky. The crown's whispers are relentless now, a constant murmur in his mind, tempting him with visions of power and dominion. He sees himself seated on a throne of obsidian, the kingdoms of the world bowing before him, their fear and reverence fueling his strength. But beneath the grandeur lies a darker truth, a world choked by shadows, its people enslaved by his will. The visions are vivid, almost tangible, and Kael can feel the crown's pull growing stronger with every step. Lyra walks beside him, her sharp eyes never straying far from his face. She sees the tension in his jaw, the way his hands clench and unclench at his sides, and knows the battle raging within him. She's seen the crown's influence grow, its darkness seeping into his soul, and she knows they're running out of time. Desperation drives her to action. As they pause to rest in the shadow of a crumbling watchtower, she lays out her plan. When we reach the fortress, she begins, her voice low but steady. We'll need to destroy the crown. Not just disable it, shatter it completely. The Sorcerer's power is tied to it. If we can break the crown, we break him. Kael listens, his expression unreadable. The idea of destroying the crown feels like a betrayal, not just of his bloodline, but of the power he's come to rely on. He nods, agreeing to the plan, but deep down, he's not sure he can follow through. The crown's whispers grow louder, filling his mind with doubts and temptations. You don't have to destroy it, they say. You can control it. You can be the king you were meant to be. The words are seductive, and Kael feels his resolve wavering. As they press on, the fortress looms larger, its dark energy pressing down on them like a physical weight. Kael's visions intensify, showing him glimpses of a future where he rules as a tyrant, his power unchecked, his humanity lost. He sees Lyra standing before him, her eyes filled with sorrow as she pleads with him to stop. The image shakes him, but the crown's whispers are quick to soothe his fears. She doesn't understand, they say. She doesn't see what you could be, what you could achieve. Lyra, sensing his turmoil, reaches out, her voice cutting through the whispers. Kael, listen to me. The crown is lying to you. It's not showing you what you could be, it's showing you what it wants you to be. Don't let it win. You're stronger than this. Her words are a lifeline, a reminder of the man he was before the crown's darkness took hold. But the closer they get to the fortress, the harder it becomes to hold on to that version of himself. When they finally reach the fortress gates, the air is thick with tension. The sorcerer's forces are waiting, their forms shifting and indistinct, their eyes gleaming with malice. Kael and Lyra move as one, their movements fluid and precise, cutting through the enemy with a skill born of necessity. But the closer they get to the heart of the fortress, the more Kael feels the crown's power surging within him, its darkness mingling with his own doubts and fears. He knows the final confrontation is coming, and with it, the moment of truth. Can he destroy the crown, or will its power prove too great to resist? The answer lies in the shadows, waiting to be unveiled. The fortress looms before them, its dark spires clawing at the sky like the fingers of some ancient beast. Kael and Lyra stand at the edge of its shadow, the weight of their journey pressing heavily on their shoulders. The air is thick with tension, the faint hum of dark magic prickling at their skin. As they step through the iron gates, the sorcerer's voice echoes through the cavernous halls, cold and commanding. "Welcome, Kael," he says, his tone dripping with mockery. "I've been waiting for you." The sorcerer emerges from the shadows, his form cloaked in swirling darkness. His eyes gleam with an unnatural light, and the power radiating from him is palpable. Kael feels the crown's energy surge in response, a strange connection forming between them. The sorcerer smiles, a cruel twist of his lips, as he begins to speak. "You think you're different from me, don't you?" he says, his voice a silken thread of temptation. "But you're not. I was once like you, a descendant of the forgotten kings, drawn to the crown's power, believing I could control it. But the crown doesn't let you control it. It controls you." Kael's grip tightens on the crown, its whispers growing louder, more insistent. The sorcerer's words strike a chord deep within him, awakening doubts he's tried to suppress. He sees the truth in the sorcerer's eyes, the same hunger, the same struggle that now consumes him. The sorcerer steps closer, his voice softening. "Join me," he says, extending a hand. "Together, we can restore our bloodline's glory. The throne is ours by right. Don't throw it away for some misguided sense of morality." For a moment, Kael hesitates. The offer is tempting, the promise of power and legacy, a siren's call he can't easily ignore. But then he feels Lyra's presence beside him, her steady gaze anchoring him to the present. She doesn't speak, but her silence says everything. She's been his guide, his conscience, the one who's kept him from losing himself to the crown's darkness. The sorcerer notices his hesitation and sneers. "You'd choose her over your destiny," he scoffs. "A mere scholar over the throne of kings." The words sting, but they also clarify. Kael looks at Lyra, her face pale but resolute, and knows what he has to do. "I'm not you," he says, his voice steady despite the storm raging within him. "And I won't let the crown turn me into something I'm not." The sorcerer's expression darkens, his patience evaporating. "Then you leave me no choice," he snarls, raising his hand. The air crackles with energy as dark tendrils lash out, forcing Kael and Lyra to leap apart. The battle is fierce, the fortress shaking with the force of their clash. Kael channels the crown's power, its energy coursing through him like a living thing. He's stronger than ever, his movements swift and precise, but the cost is steep. Every use of the crown drains him, its darkness seeping deeper into his soul. He can feel it changing him, the line between himself and the crown blurring with every passing moment. But he doesn't stop. He can't. Not while the Sorcerer stands between him and the chance to end this cycle of destruction. The Sorcerer fights with a ferocity born of desperation, his movements wild and unpredictable. He knows this is his last stand, his final chance to claim the crown's power for himself. But Kael is relentless, his determination fueled by the weight of everything he's fought for. In a final, desperate move, he unleashes the crown's full power, the shadows erupting around him in a torrent of energy. The force of it knocks the Sorcerer back, his form dissolving into the darkness as the fortress begins to crumble around them. As the dust settles, Kael collapses to his knees, the crown slipping from his grasp. His body trembles, his vision swimming as the crown's energy drains him. He can feel its darkness lingering, a cold presence that refuses to let go. Lyra rushes to his side, her hands warm against his face as she tries to steady him. "It's over," she says, her voice trembling with relief, but Kael knows it's not. The battle may be won, but the war within him is far from over. The crown's whispers are quieter now, but they're still there, a constant reminder of the power he carries and the price he's paid to wield it. The fortress trembles as the Sorcerer's form dissolves into shadow, his final cry of defiance echoing through the crumbling halls. Kael stands amidst the chaos, his chest heaving, his body trembling from the strain of the battle. The crown lies at his feet, its dark energy still pulsing faintly, a reminder of the power he's just unleashed. For a moment, there's silence, a fleeting, fragile calm. But it doesn't last. The crown's whispers return, louder now, more insistent. They coil around his mind like a serpent, their voices a seductive blend of temptation and threat. "You've won," they murmur. "The throne is yours, the power is yours, take it. Claim what is rightfully yours." Kael's vision blurs, the weight of the crown's influence pressing down on him. He sees flashes of a future where he rules unchallenged, where the kingdoms bow before him, where the shadows bend to his will. The images are intoxicating, but beneath them lies a chilling truth. He's not in control. The crown is. Lyra watches from across the room, her sharp eyes catching every flicker of struggle on Kael's face. She knows what's happening. She's seen this before, in the Sorcerer, in the ruins, in the visions of kings who fell to the crown's darkness. Her heart races as she realizes there's only one way to stop it. She reaches into the pouch at her side, her fingers closing around the remnants of the shattered shard. The fragments are jagged and cold, their light flickering faintly, like the last embers of a dying fire. It's a desperate plan, but it's all they have. Without hesitation, Lyra steps forward, her voice cutting through the crown's whispers like a blade. "Kael," she shouts, her tone sharp and urgent. He turns to her, his eyes clouded with shadows, his expression distant. She doesn't wait for him to respond. With a swift, decisive motion, she presses the shard's fragments into his hand. The effect is immediate. The crown's energy recoils, its whispers faltering as the shard's light flares to life. Kael stumbles back, his body convulsing as the two forces clash within him. The darkness of the crown and the light of the shard. The pain is excruciating, a searing agony that feels like it's tearing him apart. He falls to his knees, his vision swimming as the battle rages within him. Lyra drops beside him, her hands gripping his shoulders, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Fight it, Kael," she urges. "Don't let it win. You're stronger than this. You've always been stronger than this." Her words are a lifeline, a reminder of the man he was before the crown's darkness took hold. The shard's light grows brighter, its energy pushing back against the crown's hold. Kael feels the whispers fading, the weight of the darkness lifting from his mind. But the cost is steep. Lyra's strength wanes with every passing moment, her breath coming in shallow gasps as the shard's energy drains her. She's giving everything she has to save him, and it's almost too much. Her grip on his shoulders weakens, her body trembling as she fights to stay conscious. Kael looks at her, his vision clearing, his mind sharpening as the shard's light breaks through the crown's influence. He sees her, really sees her, for the first time in what feels like an eternity. Her face is pale, her eyes filled with a mix of exhaustion and determination. She's risking everything for him, and the weight of that sacrifice hits him like a tidal wave. "Lyra," he murmurs, his voice hoarse. You can't do this. "It's killing you." She shakes her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "It's worth it," she whispers. "You're worth it." Her words are soft but unwavering, a testament to the bond they've forged through countless trials. And in that moment, Kael knows what he has to do. With a surge of resolve, he pulls the crown from his head, its dark energy hissing as it fights to maintain its hold. The shard's light flickers, its power waning, but it's enough. Kael raises the crown high, his hands trembling as he channels the last remnants of the shard's energy. The air crackles with power as the two forces collide, the crown's darkness shattering under the weight of the light. The explosion sends Kael and Lyra sprawling, the fortress shaking as the crown's energy is finally, irrevocably destroyed. When the dust settles, Kael lies on the cold stone floor, his body weak but his mind clear. Lyra is beside him, her breathing shallow but steady. She reaches for his hand, her grip firm despite her exhaustion. "It's over," she says, her voice barely above a whisper. Kael looks at her, his heart swelling with gratitude and something deeper, something he can't quite put into words. "It's over," he agrees, his voice soft but steady. But as they lie there, surrounded by the ruins of the fortress and the remnants of the crown, Kael knows the battle isn't truly over. The darkness may be gone, but its echoes linger, a reminder of the choices he's made and the ones he still has to face. The path ahead is uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he feels like he has a chance to rebuild, to heal, to find a way forward. And with Lyra by his side, he knows he won't have to face it alone. The air in the fortress is heavy with the weight of what's been lost and what's been gained. Kael kneels amidst the rubble, the shattered remnants of the crown of shadows, scattered around him like shards of broken glass. The once pulsing energy that had coursed through it is gone, leaving only silence in its wake. Lyra sits beside him, her breathing labored but her spirit unbroken. She watches him closely, her sharp eyes filled with a quiet understanding. "It's over," she says softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've done it, Kael. You've broken the cycle." But Kael doesn't feel the relief he expected. The crown's power may be gone, but its legacy lingers, a shadow that clings to him like a second skin. He looks down at his hands, still trembling from the strain of the battle, and feels the emptiness where the crown's energy once resided. It's a strange sensation, both liberating and unnerving. For so long, the crown had been a part of him, its whispers a constant presence in his mind. Now there's only silence, and in that silence, he hears the echoes of the choices he's made. Lyra's voice cuts through his thoughts, steady and unwavering. "You have to let it go," she says, her tone firm but gentle. The crown's power wasn't just a tool, it was a trap. "You've seen what it does to people. You've seen what it almost did to you." Her words are a reminder of the cost of power, of the darkness that had nearly consumed him. Kael knows she's right, but the decision isn't easy. The crown was more than just a relic. It was a connection to his bloodline, to the kings who came before him. Destroying it feels like severing a part of himself, like turning his back on the legacy he's only just begun to understand. But as he looks at Lyra, her face pale but resolute, he realizes something important. His legacy isn't defined by the crown or the power it wielded. It's defined by the choices he makes, by the person he chooses to be. The crown's destruction isn't an end, it's a beginning. A chance to rebuild, not just the shattered kingdoms, but himself. With a deep breath, he nods, his resolve hardening. "You're right," he says, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions within him. It's time to let it go. Together, they gather the shattered pieces of the crown, their hands moving in silent unison. The fragments are jagged and cold, their dark energy fading with every passing moment. Kael hesitates for just a second, his fingers brushing against the largest shard. It's the last piece, the final connection to the power that had defined so much of his journey. He looks at Lyra, her eyes filled with quiet encouragement, and makes his choice. With a decisive motion, he smashes the shard against the stone floor, the sound echoing through the empty halls. The effect is immediate. The crown's energy dissipates, its darkness dissolving into the air like mist under the morning sun. Kael feels it leave him, a weight lifting from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized he was carrying. The silence that follows is profound, a stillness that feels almost sacred. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, he feels free. Lyra places a hand on his shoulder, her touch warm and grounding. "You did the right thing," she says, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "Not just for yourself, but for everyone." Kael looks at her, his heart swelling with gratitude. She's been his anchor, his guide, the one who's kept him from losing himself to the crown's darkness. And now, as they stand together amidst the ruins of the fortress, he knows that whatever comes next, they'll face it together. The path ahead is uncertain, the scars of the past still fresh. But for the first time, Kael feels a sense of hope, a belief that the future can be brighter than the shadows of the past. The crown may be gone, but its destruction has opened the door to something new, a chance to rebuild, to heal, to create a legacy that isn't defined by power, but by the choices that shape it. And as the first rays of dawn break through the fortress's shattered walls, Kael knows that this is just the beginning. The destruction of the crown sends a ripple of change across the land, its dark energy dissipating into the air like a storm finally passing. The once twisted skies clear, and the oppressive weight that had hung over the kingdoms begins to lift. For the first time in generations, the world feels lighter, as though it can breathe again. But for Kael and Lyra, the victory comes with a heavy price. The scars of their journey are etched not just on their bodies, but on their souls. Kael stands amidst the ruins of the fortress, his hands still trembling from the final act of shattering the crown. The silence that follows is deafening, a stark contrast to the constant whispers that had plagued him for so long. He feels free, yet hollow, as if a part of him has been torn away. The choices he made, the lives lost, the sacrifices demanded weigh heavily on his mind. He replays every moment, every decision, wondering if there was another path, another way. The guilt is a shadow he can't shake, even as the sun breaks through the clouds. Lyra, though weakened and pale, remains steadfast at his side. Her strength has always been in her resilience, her ability to see the light even in the darkest moments. She places a hand on his arm, her touch grounding him. "It's over," she says softly, her voice carrying a quiet strength. "You've done what no one else could. The world is free because of you." Her words are a balm, but they can't erase the pain in his eyes. She knows this isn't the end of his struggle. It's just the beginning of a new kind of battle, one fought within himself. As they begin the long journey back to Eldarion, the world around them seems to pulse with new life. Fields that had lain barren for years begin to sprout green shoots, and the air is filled with the songs of birds returning to a land they had long abandoned. The balance has been restored, but the scars of the past remain. Kael walks in silence, his thoughts a storm of doubt and regret. He feels the weight of the crown's absence, not as a relief, but as a void. For so long, it had been a part of him, a dark, twisted part, but a part nonetheless. Now without it, he feels untethered, unsure of who he is without its influence. Lyra watches him closely, her sharp eyes catching every flicker of emotion on his face. She knows this journey isn't just about rebuilding the world, it's about rebuilding themselves. "You're not alone in this," she says, her voice breaking the silence. "You never were, and you don't have to carry this burden by yourself." Her words are a reminder of the bond they've forged, a connection that has weathered the darkest of storms. She doesn't offer empty platitudes or false promises, just the quiet assurance that she's there, that she believes in him, even when he struggles to believe in himself. The road ahead is long and uncertain. The kingdoms they pass through are in disarray, their people struggling to recover from the devastation wrought by the crown's darkness. But there's hope in their eyes now, a spark that had been missing for so long. Kael and Lyra become symbols of that hope, their presence a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, light can prevail. Yet for Kael, the light feels distant, a flicker he can't quite reach. He wonders if he'll ever feel whole again, if the scars of his choices will ever fade. Lyra, ever the pragmatic scholar, begins to chart a path forward, She speaks of rebuilding, of creating something new from the ashes of the old. Her plans are ambitious, but grounded in a deep understanding of the world and its people. She talks of alliances, of healing, of forging a future where the mistakes of the past are not repeated. Her vision is a beacon, guiding Kael through the fog of his own doubts. And slowly, tentatively, he begins to see a way forward, not as the man who carried the crown, but as the man who chose to destroy it. The journey is far from easy. The scars of their ordeal remain, a constant reminder of what they've endured. But as they walk side by side, their steps grow steadier, their resolve stronger. The shadows of the past may linger, but they no longer define them. Together, they begin to rebuild not just the world, but themselves. And in that act of creation, they find a glimmer of the hope they've fought so hard to protect. The gates of Eldarion swing open to a chorus of cheers as Kael and Lyra step into the city they once fought to save. The streets are alive with celebration, banners fluttering in the breeze, and the air filled with the sound of laughter and music. Faces light up as the crowd recognizes them, their names carried on the wind like a song. The saviors of Eldarion, someone shouts, and the cry is taken up by others, echoing through the city. Kael feels the weight of their gratitude, their hope, pressing down on him. These people, ordinary men, women, and children, see him as something more than a man. To them, he's a symbol, a beacon of light in a world that had been shrouded in darkness for too long. But as the crowd surges around him, Kael's heart is heavy. He knows what they want from him, a leader, a king, someone to guide them into this new era. He can see it in their eyes, the way they look to him with a mixture of awe and expectation. It's a familiar weight, one that reminds him too much of the crown's pull. He steps back, his voice steady but firm as he addresses the crowd. "I'm not your king," he says, his words cutting through the cheers. "I'm just a man who made a choice. The real heroes are all of you, the ones who kept fighting, even when the shadows were at their darkest." The crowd falls silent, their faces a mix of confusion and disappointment, but Kael doesn't waver. He knows the dangers of power, the way it can twist even the best intentions, and he refuses to let history repeat itself. Lyra stands beside him, her presence a quiet reassurance. She understands his decision, perhaps better than anyone. Together, they begin the slow, painstaking work of rebuilding. Their first task is to unite the fractured kingdoms, to forge alliances where there had once been only strife. It's not an easy path. The scars of the past run deep, and trust is a scarce commodity. But Kael and Lyra approach the task with a shared determination, using their experiences, their mistakes, their victories, to guide others away from the pitfalls of greed and ambition. They travel from city to city, speaking to leaders and common folk alike. Their message always the same: unity is not about power, but about understanding. It's about learning from the past, not repeating it. As the weeks turn into months, Kael begins to find a sense of purpose that had eluded him for so long. The weight of the crown's legacy still lingers, but it no longer defines him. Instead, he discovers a quiet kind of strength in the simple act of helping others. He works alongside farmers to rebuild their fields, shares stories with children who look up to him with wide-eyed wonder, and listens to the fears and hopes of those who have endured so much. It's in these moments, far removed from the battles and the grand gestures, that he begins to heal. The guilt that had haunted him starts to fade, replaced by a growing sense of peace. Lyra, too, finds her place in this new world. Her knowledge and insight become invaluable as they work to create systems of governance that prioritize fairness and cooperation. She writes tirelessly, documenting their journey and the lessons they've learned, ensuring that the mistakes of the past are never forgotten. Together, they become a symbol of something greater than themselves, not of power, but of resilience, of the ability to rise from the ashes and build something better. Yet, even as they work toward a brighter future, Kael can't shake the feeling that their journey is far from over. The world is still fragile, its wounds still fresh, and the shadows of the past are never far behind. But for the first time, he feels ready to face whatever comes next. He's no longer the man who carried the crown, nor the thief who stumbled into a destiny too great for his understanding. He's simply Kael, a man who chose to do the right thing even when it was hard, and in that choice he finds not just peace, but a sense of hope for what lies ahead. The sun dips low on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the fields of Eldarion, now lush and vibrant, where once there had been only decay. Kael stands at the edge of the city, his gaze sweeping over the bustling streets and the faces of people who have found hope again. It's a sight that fills him with a quiet pride, but also a lingering ache. The weight of what they've endured, the battles fought, the sacrifices made, hangs in the air like a ghost. He feels it in the quiet moments, in the stillness between breaths. The darkness that once consumed him may be gone, but its shadow remains, a reminder of the choices he made and the price he paid. Lyra joins him, her steps slow but steady, her presence a calming force. She's still recovering, her strength not yet fully returned, but her spirit is unbroken. She looks out at the city, her sharp eyes catching the details: the children playing in the streets, the merchants trading goods, the laughter that had been absent for so long. "We did this," she says, her voice soft but filled with conviction. "You did this." Kael turns to her, his expression a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "I couldn't have done it without you," he replies, his tone heavy with emotion. "You've been my anchor, Lyra. When the darkness was at its worst, you were the light that kept me from losing myself." The bond between them, forged in the fires of their shared trials, is stronger than ever. It's a connection that goes beyond words, a quiet understanding that needs no explanation. Lyra places a hand on his arm, her touch warm and grounding. "You've carried so much," she says, her voice gentle, "but you don't have to carry it alone anymore." The darkness may still be a part of you, but it doesn't define you, not anymore. Her words are a lifeline, pulling him back from the edge of his doubts. He nods, his gaze returning to the city. "I know," he says quietly, "but sometimes it's hard to let go, to believe that I deserve this peace." Lyra's smile is soft but unwavering. "You do," she says simply. "We both do." Her faith in him, in the future they've fought so hard to create, is a source of strength he hadn't realized he needed. Together, they've faced the impossible and emerged stronger for it. And as they stand there, watching the sun set over a land that is finally healing, Kael feels a glimmer of something he thought he'd lost hope. The days that follow are filled with small but meaningful victories. They work side by side, rebuilding not just the physical structures of the kingdoms, but the trust and unity that had been shattered by years of strife. Kael finds purpose in the simple acts of kindness, helping a farmer repair a fence, teaching a child to read, listening to the stories of those who have lived through the darkness. It's in these moments that he begins to see the impact of their journey, not just on the world, but on himself. The guilt that had haunted him begins to fade, replaced by a growing sense of peace. Lyra, too, finds strength in their shared efforts. Her recovery is slow, but each day brings a little more light to her eyes, a little more energy to her step. She throws herself into the work, using her knowledge and insight to guide the rebuilding efforts. Her determination is infectious, inspiring those around her to believe in a future they once thought impossible. And through it all, she remains a steady presence at Kael's side. Her quiet strength, a constant reminder that they are stronger together than they could ever be apart. As the weeks turn into months, the scars of the past begin to heal, both within the land and within themselves. The shadows may never fully fade. Kael knows this, feels it in the quiet moments when the weight of his choices presses down on him, but they no longer hold the same power over him. The light he has found in Lyra, in the people they've helped, is a beacon that guides him forward. It's a light he chooses to focus on, even on the days when the darkness feels close. One evening, as they sit by the fire in the heart of Eldarion, Lyra turns to him, her expression thoughtful. "What's next for us?" she asks, her voice quiet but filled with curiosity. Kael looks at her, the flickering light casting shadows across her face. "I don't know," he admits, "but whatever it is, I know we'll face it together." His words are simple, but they carry a weight that speaks to the depth of their bond. Lyra nods, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. Together, she agrees. The future is uncertain, the road ahead filled with challenges they can't yet imagine. But as they sit there, the warmth of the fire and the sound of the city, around them a reminder of what they've achieved, Kael knows one thing for certain. They've already faced the worst the world could throw at them. And they've come out stronger on the other side. The shadows may linger, but they no longer hold the power to define their lives. Together, they've found a way to keep the darkness at bay, and that, more than anything, is a victory worth celebrating. The hilltop offers a sweeping view of Eldarion, its spires and streets, bathed in the warm glow of the setting sun. Kael and Lyra stand side by side, the horizon stretching endlessly before them. The city below hums with life, a testament to the resilience of its people and the strength of their shared efforts. For Kael, this moment feels like a quiet victory, a chance to breathe, to reflect, and to let go of the shadows that once clung to him. The crown of shadows is gone, its dark influence shattered, but the lessons it left behind remain. They linger in the choices he made, the sacrifices he endured, and the bonds he forged along the way. As the sun dips lower, casting long shadows across the land, Kael feels a sense of peace he hasn't known in years. The shadows no longer frighten him. They are a reminder of the past, yes, but also a testament to the light that emerged from the darkness. He glances at Lyra, her profile outlined by the fading light. She's been his anchor, his guide, the one who never let him lose sight of who he truly was. Her presence beside him now feels like a promise that no matter what lies ahead, they'll face it together. The first stars begin to appear, their faint light twinkling in the twilight sky. Kael takes a deep breath, the cool evening air filling his lungs. He thinks of the journey that brought them here, the battles fought, the losses endured, the moments of doubt and triumph. It wasn't just about destroying the crown or defeating the sorcerer. It was about finding the strength to choose a different path, to redefine what power truly means. He realizes now that true power isn't found in crowns or thrones, but in the choices we make and the people we choose to stand beside. Lyra squeezes his hand, pulling him gently from his thoughts. "We've come a long way," she says, her voice soft but filled with quiet pride. Kael nods, his gaze returning to the city below. "And we've still got a long way to go," he replies, a faint smile tugging at his lips. The future is uncertain, the road ahead uncharted, but for the first time, that uncertainty feels like a gift rather than a burden. Together, they turn away from the city, their steps carrying them toward the horizon. The stars above grow brighter, their light guiding them forward. The crown of shadows may be gone, but its legacy lives on, not in darkness, but in the lessons it taught and the bonds it forged. Kael knows the journey isn't over. There will be challenges ahead, moments of doubt, and trials to face, but he also knows he won't face them alone. With Lyra by his side, he feels ready to embrace whatever comes next. As they walk hand in hand into the night, the shadows of the past fade behind them, replaced by the promise of a new dawn. The story of the Crown of Shadows may have ended, but their story is just beginning. And in that beginning lies the hope of a future shaped not by fear or power, but by the strength of their choices and the light of their shared resolve.